Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this overview Scrutiny Panel meeting for October. Fire alarm procedures are as follows. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices down the main staircase opposite the lifts in the foyer. Assemble in Hawley Square on the green, and officers will assist you and advise you when it's deemed safe to return to the chamber. Would everyone present please ensure their mobiles are turned to silent and they are not used to make or receive phone calls whilst this meeting is in progress. Please note this meeting is being live streamed for members of the public. The meeting will also be recorded and subsequently broadcast on the internet. Does anyone intend to film the meeting? That's a no, and there's no members of the public, so moving on. I had no request to speak under 20.1 and no members of the public speaking. So apologies for absence. I've got Councillor Faruqi and Councillor Paul Moore substituted by Councillor Nichols. Any further apologies? Yes, sir.
Apologies from Councillor Packman.
Thank you, Alan. Any declarations of interest? That's a no. Okay, moving on to the minutes. To approve the minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel meeting held on the 17th of September 2024. A copy is attached to the agenda pack. I presume you've all read them. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Cupp and a seconder. Councillor Britcher. All members agree? Agree. Excellent. Okay, moving on to item number 4, the one you've all been waiting for. Cabinet member presentation by Councillor Alban, Cabinet member for Cleansing and Coastal Services on improving recycling in the district. Calling Councillor Alban.
Thank you, Chair, and may I say what a pleasure it is for you to have me here this evening, and hopefully with this rather boring subject we can make it a little bit lively. Before I start though, Chair, may I wish Councillor Green a very happy birthday today. I'm not sure how old he is, but I'm not going to go into that, but yeah. Anyway, thank you, thank you, Chair. Privileged to be asked, thank you. Can I have the first slide, please? Thank you. I can't see that, so I'm reading off my own copy. Forgot my glasses. As that says there, the primary indication of a local authority recycling performance is its recycling rate. And to put it simply, this is a ratio of waste that is recycled as opposed to treated as refuse. Thanet's current 2022-23 recycling rate is 35.4%, which is a 1% increase of the previous year. However, that still leaves us 250th out of 343 local authorities nationally and 11th of 12 authorities in Kent. As you can see by the grid by the side, it shows you where we were, where we are. Can I just want to make a point here, Chair, and that is that this graph effectively on all these towns together, as you all know, are not equal. They're not judged on the same process, it's just on a recycling rate, and if you get to a good recycling rate, the more money you get effectively. But if you take an area of Thanet, a deprived area, you can't compare that with Tunbridge Wells or Tunbridge. It's just because we don't get the amount of people who want to recycle, and it's a difficult task. But I'll get to that as we move on, Chair. So if I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. As well as the moral obligation to the environment, there is also a financial element that we must take into consideration. We currently receive £310,000 per annum from Kent County Council for the waste we provide. This payment is due to be replaced for the next financial year by payments from the extended producer responsibility. I didn't make that up. I don't know who's made that up. Effectively the EPR scheme. This is a regulatory reform which will seek to recover the costs from producers for collecting and processing packing within household waste. These payments will be linked to our recycling performance. As part of this, it's expected that we are at the same level after the first year. We're looking for a bedding in period to look to do things differently, which we have been working on for about 6 months now. So we will be subject to that deduction should things not work out right and should we not get our recycling rate up. So just to say that this payment is due to be replaced, the 310,000 per annum is due to be replaced in the next financial year by payments from this extended producer responsibility scheme. This is a regulatory reform which will seek to recover the costs from us, as I've said, and while it is hoped that this payment will be greater than our current IAA payment, notification is expected of that in November. The payment is subject to up to 20% reduction, which would be dependent on the recycling performance. So, if effectively, with the new scheme coming in, we must ensure that our rate goes up. Otherwise, we will lose the money that we've got, and that will affect our service. Next slide, please, Nick. Thank you. So what are we doing about it, effectively? We want to offer recycling to all. Currently, around 17%, approximately just over 12,000 properties are not receiving a full recycling service. And those are normally houses in multiple occupation, houses which front straight onto the street scene where they can't have bins, etc., etc., multiple occupation in relation to tower blocks, although we have with our colleagues in housing installed recycling facilities at Trove and Kennedy House in Ramsgate. That was there as a test. Councillor Bayford was very helpful in that when she was the cabinet member. But we're looking as well with housing to spread that out to the other tower blocks, because we think it's been quite an excellent way forward. Food recycling, as well as offering this service to the same 12,000 properties that don't get recycling, we're also encouraging increased participation from those currently eligible for a collection. Because a lot of people who have already got the brown bins don't actually use them. They just go straight in the ordinary waste. So that's another thing, a bit of education that we need to get out, as well as the other things that I've already mentioned. Garden waste. The service has capacity for around 3,000 customers, and we need to find ways to promote the service further. Following service standards, we need to ensure that no excess residual waste is collected to encourage people to think about how they could recycle more. So currently, although it's not within our collection standards, we will collect. If people put a black sack next to their bin, we pick that up. We will need to be able to go back to tell our residents that will stop in line with our process, and that they will have to ensure all their rubbish goes in the black bin, and it will not get picked up otherwise. But that, we hope, will ensure that they try to recycle more, which will then help with the recycling figures. Marginal gains, expansion of for what we call the leafing service, on-street litter recycling and other small changes are to be made. and we're currently looking at it as in line with the overall service. Next page, please, Nick. Going to offering recycling to all. Currently, as I've said, over 12,000 of Thanet's 69,000 homes, or just above 69,000, are not offered a recycling service and have a weekly refuse collection instead. You can see there the amount of properties which have a lack of frontage, flats above shops, and medium to high-rise buildings, which adds up to that 12,000. The common issue, as I previously said, is a lack of space both internally and externally. We are exploring options to address this with the clear objective of offering recycling to as many of these properties as possible. This could involve collecting the recycling in a bespoke bag, and a review is underway to break down exactly what each property would require. This will lead to some options being developed and costed. As you know, for a lot of them, a lot of people have the seagull-proof bins, and if we can, and Mr. Elmer's been in discussion with County Council, and that's looked very, very positive to be able to get these residents bags which can have mixed recycling, not paper in one and plastic and tins in another, but mixed recycling, and KCC appear to be very favourable with that. So we are pursuing that. The weekly refuse collection means that they have little or no incentive to recycle, and that's something we believe that we need to shake up. Fundamentally, the three areas that don't currently recycle do not have the space to present bins or other receptacles needed to participate in the service. However, positively, both councillors Austin and Curry have spoken to residents who live in the housing blocks who have actively sought ways to recycle. And thank you for that. Challenge will be convincing those that the new service is worth the extra effort. And the problem, as we've got in Cliftonville West and in parts of Ramsgate, are that we have residents who move around a lot, and so they're not particularly bothered where they're living and recycling or doing anything of that nature. So this is where I think we need work with the actual owners of the property to ensure that they are notified, and that we will need to be able to follow that up. And that goes along with education. Next one, please. Thank you. Just to continue, while in basic terms, increasing the number of people recycling will increase the recycling rate, there is also a number of hurdles to overcome. And of course, one of those is financial. There's the logistical side of it, a communication part, which I've just mentioned, and trying to implement a behavioural change with some of our residents. If following further scoping, it is decided that the additional investment is justified, a phased introduction will be required so that we can manage the change, and that goes for both on a financial basis and the logistics of it. Because effectively it would mean one particular vehicle specifically for the mixed recycling, because it can't go in the same van as the ones that got the separate recycling, or lorries I should say, not vans. Financially, assuming a bagged waste service was chosen, those who would present in bags would need to be supplied with the specific bag, and that would be at a cost to TDC. Houses in multiple occupation and high rises, as I've said earlier, would need communal bins. Logistically, although it is important to remember the amount of waste to be collected would not change, a fully commingled service for these properties would require a dedicated round, of which I've just stated. Communication-wise, explanation of the change, specifically who it affects and why we are doing it, would be key to getting people to engage. Behavioural change, while it would be hoped that residents would want to recycle, it should not be ignored that doing so will be less convenient than their current collection service. If following further scoping it is decided that the additional investment is justified, as I've said, a phased introduction will be required to manage the change. I think vital to members are on board with this, and some residents will be resistant to change but will need to take part, and possible adjacent streets will have different recycling services. So neighbour talking to neighbours, well, why have I got this and why have you got that and why is this happening and why isn't that happening? So I think it would be nice to get, if we do go down this road, so all members in all wards are aware, and that we would probably need your help. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, no, we're still on the same thing, but food recycling, yeah. No, thank you, Nick, sorry. Another regulatory change is the requirement for all residents to be offered a weekly food recycling service by April 2026. As the government brought in that legislation, and we must comply. We have received transitional funding totaling $142,000 from the government to help fund this. In a good position in terms of the regulations. As well as getting it offered to all, we need to increase take-up of those already eligible. We'll need to remove the weekly refuse collections referenced previously, and the introduction of this service would take place alongside the wider introduction of commingled recycling. In 2022, our composition analysis of residual waste showed 38.6% of our refuse was food. That's quite a large amount of what you got in your black bin. Offering this service to those who have weekly refuse collection would help the transition to alternate refuse recycling services, as the smelly food waste will be collected regularly. Right, next slide, garden waste, please, Nick. Thank you. As I've stated, we currently have over 12,000 who participate in this paid service. Heavy commodity has a bigger impact on the overall rate. There is a capacity for approximately 3,000 more customers without the need for extra resources to be deployed to collect it. In July 2024, we ran a limited promotion, some of you may have seen that, which led to an increase of 194 customers, which was a 77% increase on what we've already got for the same month in 2023. Pricing, further promotions and communication strategies need to be investigated ahead of next year's service launch in April 2025. Offering a service at a reduced cost for the rest of the year. So, you know, we are still considering as to whether we look to do it on not only on a yearly basis, but maybe bring people in on a 6 monthly basis as well, because some people might only want it during the summer. So we will be looking at that. The WRAP, and I'm not quite sure what that refers to, suggests that offering the service for free increases uptake by 25%. Now obviously that would create a cost to us, a cost for running the refuse truck and also the fuel and paying the staff. Evidently Wales are the second best recyclers in the world and offer 99.9% of their population a food waste service with participation of over 50%. Now, wouldn't that be lovely if we could get that? It's a figure to aim for. Whether we hit the target or not is another matter, but it's a figure to be aimed for. Next slide, please. Right, our current collection service standards state the council will not collect any excess refuse materials put out for collection that are not contained within the provided containers, and I've already advised you of that. In reality, the crews do take the waste. This provides easy alternative not to recycle. It is proposed that we simply follow our service standards. Support from members locally essential, as I previously asked for as well, and the only potential cost would be stickers and tape to be attached to the waste collection bins. However, over a period of time, this has not generally been adhered to, and we do need a better resident experience, and we need to ensure that the complaints are dealt with properly, and with the in-truck vehicle system that we've now used. Every property that the vehicle goes by, it takes photos of the bins that are on either outside the house or on the front garden. So if someone complains, you didn't take my bin, well, what time did you put your bin out? I put it out at 8 o'clock. Well, we went by at 6, so we've got the photograph. So there's no moan. Well, there is a moan. There always is a moan because people want their bins emptied. So which we totally understand. But if we're to move forward with this, we need to instigate this. The fallout of this is that, in essence, residents have an almost unlimited residual waste capacity, and so have less need to use their recycling. So, as I said, we need to move on from that. As I said, we will put stuff on the bin, so we will notify residents. It's not just going to happen one day, come out and that. We will have a full communication to all residents in relation to this. That communication will include you as residents, so you're fully aware of what the date will be, when this will happen, what the results are likely to actually be. Next slide, please, Nick. Thank you. While in isolation, none of these initiatives will move the recycling rate significantly. Collectively, they should have an impact on the figures and changing the image of the recycling service. As I said, if you remember, I referred to leafing. So where we got the extra staff in last year, during September, October and November, when the start of the street trees leaf fall, our teams went out and cleared a lot of the street stuff, a lot of the street leaf. And it was very well received. You know, it's not perfect, but we are doing that, and we will be doing that again this year. Street litter. We need to utilise new disposal agreements, and Christmas tree collection, we did that last year with the Pilgrims Hospice, and we will be doing that again with them. Pilgrims Hospice charge, so the money goes to them, but we give our services to the hospice. So that is something that we're doing, and we think that's a good thing for our residents, as long as they're not plastic. But anyway, just to go back to each one, like leafing. As I said, we trialled the leafing, and we're looking to expand that further in the coming weeks with no additional cost. We will try, as we now have the ability to dispose of fully mixed recycling, this will make our on-street provision simpler and clearer. The 50 new bin housings agreed at Star Chamber, which will be coming through Council, improve this service further. Christmas tree collections as per last Christmas, we will continue, and with this tonnage being added to our overall recycling rate. And next one, please. Thank you, Nick. So just to summarise, members, simply put, to increase our recycling rate, we need those who don't currently recycle to join in, and those who already do to do more. We have an obvious opportunity to increase ours by giving the option to over 17% of our residents. As well as this major change, there will be smaller changes, such as limiting the residual waste we collect and promoting our garden waste services, and that will help to push the figure up. A greater push towards our participation in a food waste service will statistically have a greater impact on the overall numbers of the proportion of residual waste still made up of food. The majority of changes will need some form of investment, scoping the cost benefit of potential changes that will be ongoing. It is essential that we improve our current level to gain most of the EPR regulations which are about to start. So, Chair, that's my presentation. Thank members for listening, and happy to take your questions, as I have two of my lovely assistants with me this evening who will be able to answer the more effective questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Excellent presentation. Members, Tricia.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Steve. Obviously, very supportive of this as a development. What I'm worried about, and I'm having the conversation with you that I've had previously with Matt, is if we don't take side waste from residents, that side waste will end up at the side of street bins or in the street somewhere or in a car park or whatever. A lot of it will be food waste. Seagulls will get it. It will end up all over everywhere, particularly if we're not taking side waste at the side of street bins either. So how can we get the behaviour change going with residents? How can we make it as easy as possible for residents and make it so that they want to do this? Are there any incentives we can offer? Are there things that we can do to encourage? Because at the moment, a lot of those extra black sacks are the thinnest possible ones because people are obviously trying to save money as best they can. They get the cheapest possible sacks. The seagulls are into them. I have suggested in the past, not entirely in jest to Mr. Humber, that we might actually be cheaper to issue every resident with a roll of rubble bags than pay street cleaners to clean up the mess after the seagulls have got into those sacks. So my first and biggest question is what do we do about that? I've got several others, but I'll let other people go ahead.
Thank you for that, Councillor Austin. Yeah, it's a problem. It's an issue that we've got to deal with. Yeah. For us to be able to bring our recycling up, we need to do something, and we need, as I said, our service standards are, you got a bin, use the bin, nothing on the side. But as I've said in the presentation, that is for us to ensure. I mean, this is not going to happen overnight. you know, we need to work at it. We need to build up with it. We've got other things that are happening with KCC and everything of that nature. So that's where my personal thing is. Probably others will tell me otherwise, but my personal thing is I want to drip feed this. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're looking at. We want your view, residents. You know, this is what and I know they go, well, I'll put my bins out. I know what they'll say. I'll put my black sacks out, which I understand. But the fact of the matter is, if you put your bin out on the, if you chuck a sack out on the road, then you know is that going to be outside your front of your house? Would you? I mean, I don't know. But there's no easy answer to it, Councillor Austin. But people do it anyway already. We know down in Harbour Street in Ramsgate, you know, and it's specifically Airbnbs because they're not licensed, they're not whatever. They just chuck them out on the pavement, and the seagulls get it, and it's all over the road, and then we have to go and clean it. So we have that problem anyway. So those are the things that we need. But you know, these so.
Incentives, or any kind of way that we can incentivise them?
Well, I think the incentive for them is that if we can get the recycling going and we get more money coming in, then we might be able to get more people, more staff out onto the street, which people want to see. So there is that part to it, and I think those are the kind of things that personally I'm trying to aim at, because we all know what the financial standard is. So we need to increase income to get more staff, and so that's my view. But yeah, it is going to be a problem.
Councillor Curry.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for your presentation, Steve. On that last point, I think encouraging sort of bin sharing can be a way forward as well. As we know with lots of roads, some bins are packed solid with bags left on top. Other bins are empty, maybe with one bag. It's something members could get involved in this, talking about, you know, neighbours sharing sort of bins, and some neighbours, yeah, that would be a good thing. As we know, HMOs, blocks of flats, the biggest problems with recycling, always difficult. I think the large recycling bins placed near these HMOs can be a bonus for recycling. I was wondering how well the large recycling bins have done. We've had quite a few out during the summer. The other thing is red recycling bags. I wondered what was the plan for them. They can be quite effective. Some people like them. I know they do blow away, but sort of in some properties they are effective. And the other thing was, will new bins be distributed to residents? So a few questions there. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Curry. As you know, we've done a lot of work down Ethelbert Road, and which has large bins, large HMOs. And it doesn't matter what size of bin you put down there. People come from all over in the middle of the night and bung things on the bin, on the top of the bins, around the bins, and it's very, very difficult to actually combine it. So we tried all sorts down there. I also tried along on Canterbury Road in Margate, where there was bins on one side of the road, absolutely mullered come a weekend, with food all over it, or food all over the pavement. So I said, take them away. People still did it for a little while, and then they cleared.
I was actually sort of talking about, you know, the communal recycling
Oh,
bins,
sorry, yeah, I was getting to that. I thought you were doing
yeah.
too. Sorry. Yeah, as far as the communal recycling bins were, especially along the seafront, worked very, very well. We're quite pleased with that, and we are looking for extra to put out for next year as well, especially on the seafronts, which we did have some problem one day this year, sorry. But yeah, we were doing that. HMOs, real problem with multiple occupancies, but as I said, I think this is where we need to get our, perhaps our street scene enforcement teams to be chasing owners. I know a lot of owners, some of the owners in Cliftonville don't live in this country. They're run by agents. agents are in London and they don't give a monkeys. But there needs to be some way of getting a penalty for those. The red sacks, we want to phase these out, and we want red topped bins. So that, because it just makes sense, but it doesn't for all, because not everybody can have a bin. But that's why we're looking at the mixed recycling for those that can't have a red bin. So we will be doing that. But that's the way that we think at the moment. Thank you.
Councillor Cupp.
I thought you were going to go to Councillor Davis first. Thanks. Thank you, Steve, for that presentation. Really interesting. Just on a couple of points that Councillor Austin raised, just to carry on from that, is there any grounds to look at whether or not there are kind of peak times when residents are putting bags out of their homes, like Christmas, for example, and in those kind of seasonal times? And if that is the case, is there potential grounds to actually look at allowing there to be a bit of wriggle room to say, do you know, at this time we will allow it because we understand that there are going to be an increase of waste going on there. And also there are, and I'm not saying that the council gives out to everyone, but there are, there are contraptions that you can attach to the bin where you push the bin bags down and it gives you more space. And I don't know if that is something we can also try and encourage residents to look into, because it's amazing how much more you can fit into a bin when you're pushing the bags down. I have one myself, and it is very useful. And I don't get a commission from them, by the way. I just want to point that out. And then, so also on bigger black bins as well for residents, obviously there is grounds on how big a black bin can be, according of residents, how many residents are occupying a house. Is it a case that if there are constant times where a certain household is often leaving bin bags on the side of their already full bin, is there any leeway, or could there be any leeway to say to that resident, we are prepared to give you a bigger bin because we can't help with you putting the bin bags out to one side, so actually there could be grounds for you to have a bigger bin? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Sort of trying to address numerous points that have been picked up, especially around the side waste. I think the important thing for me is maybe not so much the need to incentivise people, but more to educate people of the reason why we're doing it. In terms of sort of giving leeway or contraptions to put more waste in a bin, I think the important thing about this, like Steve said, it's not going to be like an overnight change where suddenly we bring something like this in, but we need to not give people leeway to put out more black sack rubbish, but maybe give them more capacity to recycle their waste and dispose of it in a more environmentally friendly and ethical way, rather than sort of give them opportunity to do the things that we don't want environmentally, and as Steve pointed out as well, financially for the council as well. I think if the big thing for me is the amount of waste people produce isn't going to change. The way in which they dispose of it can change, and that's the message we need to be promoting. And it's not only the message we promote, it's the actions that we take as well. So if someone needs an extra bin, why does it have to be a black waste bin? Why not make it a recycling bin and encourage them to fill that up with lots of lovely recycling that we can take away and dispose of in a better manner?
Yeah, George, if I could just come back to you on the Christmas thing, if you use that. Yeah, we already do that. You know, we know that that's going to be more time, you know, when Amazon boxes are all over the place and whatever. So, yeah, I mean, that's a fair comment, and we wouldn't want to not do that. You know, our staff work every day except for Christmas Day, you know, and so there will be out Boxing Day on various rounds, etc., and the amount of waste we collect on that over that couple of days is amazing. It's tremendous. As far as I've got a contraption, like
Hold your breath.
that one, yeah. They're called feet, actually, and I normally stamp down on mine. But anyway, you know. So, but that's yeah. So I'll skirt around that one. And I've written something down. I can't read my own bloody writing. Oh, sorry, Chair. No, I don't know what it was, George. I'm sorry.
Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Chair. Again, thank you, Steve, and I'll reiterate what others have said. It was a really good report. I'm really encouraged by the mixed recycling initiative and this idea of bags for it, because it is a big issue. I live in one of those areas where we just have no recycling. The ability to just separate that recycling indoors and put it out with a bag solves all the problem. And I like the fact that it's simple as well. I mean, would we be looking at this mixed recycling becoming blanket eventually and everybody being on that? Or will it always be a split system? Because I took on board, my initial thoughts were a nice idea, but my God, there's going to have to be some education and promotion to overcome the fact that, what if he can do it, why can't I? So, just those observations, but really welcome, as I say, for those reasons, because recycling is an issue, and with 12,000 properties, that's a heck of a lot. That's been answered that for you.
Yeah, so you'd probably still be shaking my head. The potential, and it's important to say that it's not in any way, shape or form agreed. Yeah, there's a lot of water to go under the bridge yet, but if we were to do it, we would have the mixed recycling for those 12,200 properties that currently don't have a full recycling service. While it is obviously better than that waste going to either incineration, to incineration, the quality of recycling will be less than what we currently offer, where it's segregated at source.
Right.
Which is important. The quality of our recycling, although it is only 35% of what we do, is actually very good, and that's another discussion for between us and KCC to go down the year about the quality of what we're providing. A few notes that I made during the presentation as well is that I think two words is opportunity and ease, I think, is the thing. Give people the opportunity to recycle, which we currently don't, and make it as easy as possible for people so it's not a chore for them to do. And the other one I wrote down is you've all lived here a lot longer than I've been working here, obviously, and you'll know, not just with Thanet but with any local authority, it's important not to have a one-size-fits-all, because the service obviously doesn't fit every circumstance across the district. So we need to adapt and bend. There may be the case where one street has one service, then the next one has a completely different, then the next one has the same one as 2 streets away. That's not an ideal situation, but it's better than them all throwing it into black bins.
No, and again, thank you for that. I will. One other quick question: the EPR method of funding. Given that we're so low on that table, how much actual impact compared to the 310 precept is it going to make? Because it could of course be quite an incentive to do better. But to me, it seems an extremely punitive thing that puts the councils that are battling with the issue most under the biggest pressure at exactly the wrong time. So, you know,
in answer
well done, whichever genius thought that out. I can say that in the safe knowledge that they're miles away. So
yeah, they're in my house. Yeah, so the overall amount that we're going to receive will be published next month. All indications point that it's going to be substantially more than the 310 we get at the moment from KCC. I don't know what that number is, but if it is substantially more, there is an incentive for us. 20% of this substantial amount could feasibly be a lot more than that 310. So it is well worth our while. And as well as that, which is obviously very important because that money will be reinvested in Thanet as a whole, not just the recycling service. I just think we're all here representing the people of Thanet. Do we want to be 250th in the league table of 343? I think we should have a bit more pride and a bit more, I don't know what the word is, but we should be pushing, we should be looking towards the top of that table, not looking at who's down the bottom. We want to be pushing up. We want to have some pride in what we do and pride in our district.
We want promotion.
No, thanks for that substantial comeback, as I say, and so it's not as punitive as it appeared at first glance, which is quite relieving, let's say. So
no, I think it's right that there is. I don't know if jeopardy is the right word, but if the figure was just going to be given out to everyone, and I'm not saying we're not trying, but there needs to be an incentive for people not just to coast. And
It's being applied as an incentive, I'm all for it.
yeah, that's yeah. So it's
Being applied as a big stick to
yeah, and the other thing that it would potentially mean is that there'd be government intervention, and I don't need more people coming down telling me how to do my job. So if we can keep them away at the moment, that'd be greatly appreciated.
Councillor Bright.
Yep, thank you. I was just wondering if there are any plans to have more recycling sites around Thanet. We don't have many at the moment, like the ones in Hopeville Car Park and St Peter's Park Road car park. Are they successful? Is it Thanet that empty those bins? I'm talking about the ones with like the bottle banks and the cardboard and the textiles, that kind of thing. I'm just thinking, would it be possible to maybe have those kind of sites close to the houses that aren't able to accommodate bins, so they're more accessible, so you can get to them by foot? And would we be able to maybe have bins that collect plastic wrappers? Are there any plans to recycle plastic wrap-ins? Because at the moment, the only place I know where you can recycle plastic wrap-ins are in supermarkets. Thank you.
Have you been bugging my calls, Councillor Bright? It was something I was talking to one of the team about today about the more recycling sites and the potential to do that, and it's probably the one thing we should have put in this that Steve should have put in this presentation that he's done. Yeah, I don't see no reason why we couldn't potentially look into that. We don't collect them personally, it's contracted out, then we receive the recycling benefit from that. And yes, plastic wrappers is something that should be coming into the recycling stream over the coming years, a part of yet another set of regulations.
Councillor Pope.
Hang on. Sorry, Chair.
One second.
Sorry, Chair, if I could also just respond on to Councillor Bright as well. We sort of historically we've had a lot of problems with fly tipping and with contamination with what we call recycling bring sites. So the recycling sites in car parks where people use, for example, the cardboard and put other waste in it, and it ruins the whole load. So we end up having to tip the whole thing as residual. I think absolutely if we can control that and put it in the right place and have sort of good sort of natural surveillance over those sites, then they are useful. Curbside recycling is better. I mean, if we can, what Councillor Orban and what Matt's been talking about with trying to promote for those other 12,000 customers so that they can do it from their house and put it out on the street and be collected, that is a much, much better solution than bring sites. But if we can make them work sort of sustainably so that the recycling actually counts, then absolutely. But it's really difficult when when people unfortunately abuse them and fly tip around them. It just causes us problems, and that's the experience we've had on some of those sites. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've got 2 in my ward in Birchington, and they're massively used, but massively abused at the same time. Yeah, Councillor Pope.
Thank you. I was just wondering if you had any plans to engage with schools to roll out the information about this, just because they're quite useful for reaching families we find hard to reach, and if you get kids interested in recycling, they become passionate to the point of being quite annoying about it to their parents. So.
Yeah, okay, and that's what I like. I like kids to be annoying with their parents. In relation to recycling, I mean. And yeah, we've got an education officer, and the education officer goes around schools, and we talk to them, and the kids get involved, stuff like that. Again, if we have more resources, we could do more with schools. But I think, I know, like with my grandkids go to school, that that's one of the things that's on the agenda at schools is the climate, and what happens if you don't do these things. And it's not the children we have to educate, it's the parents we have to educate. Yeah, and but they just tell the kids, you don't shut up, you won't get your Xbox. I mean, that's effectively what it will happen. But no, yeah, but you're right.
Councillor Scobie.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Alban, for the presentation and an interesting discussion and set of questions. I wanted to ask on a slightly different tack, because obviously what Thanet does isn't in isolation, and talked about behaviour of residents and talked about government funding, but I'm interested in how cuts to KCC funding is impacting Thanet's ability to sustain these levels. I mean, there's been a number of threatened or actual cutbacks in services which is impacting TDC in different ways. Are you seeing anything from KCC, for example, in changing the way they do things at the recycling depots and the tips, or in other ways that are impacting our ability to achieve our targets?
Yeah, I mean, there hasn't been any real change, to be honest, Will. We don't get really involved in KCC's own tips. That they do whatever they're going to do. But as I was saying about the funding changing instead of from KCC, but from the Environment Agency instead of KCC, so that will take them out of them out of it. The only thing for me where we get KCC we get impacted is the lack of contact with KCC or from KCC highways, where we have cars parked on corners and our trucks can't get round. They can't get round to be able to empty people's bins, and so and they're very slow in coming with that. I mean, I think it's certainly in my ward, there's one particular area at Arklow Square around there where people are parked on it, and there's double yellow lines. But we want more double yellow lines around there, so it's to leave the trucks the space to be able to get in and get down. That's the only area I can think of KCC which affects us as a service.
Just on an unrelated point, obviously to Councillor Davis's question around whether this can be a budget increase or not, and that's good news that it's likely, or we're hoping it's going to be an increase. Just out of interest, increase from 300,000 to say 500,000, how much is that increase as a percentage of the total budget? Forgive me, I don't know what the recycling or the waste budget is as like a rough total. Is that a drop in the ocean? Is that a substantial increase? Does that mean we can do a lot more, or is it just some additional services or support?
We've just been doing some maths on your 500,000 figure, and that would be about 7-8% increase. I did that off the top of my head, honestly.
You have to take your shoes and socks off.
Councillor Wing.
Oh, thank you both of you. I mean, I was lucky enough to listen to Matt at the Ramsgate Litter Forum, and it's the first time we'd actually heard anybody. Matthew, he talked about wanting to increase the recycling, which we found really refreshing, and it is good news that we've got up 1%, and we could maybe compare ourselves to Folkestone and Hythe and Dover, and they're at 40, so it's definitely that first hurdle up to 40 is probably achievable. I wondered, one of the things I wanted when I first got elected was I asked for all the information on what streets get in terms of recycling and bin collections, and it created, I was asked to withdraw my freedom of information request actually by the leader at the time, Bob Bayford, because it would have taken 2 officers 2 weeks to give me that information. But the reason I wanted that information is because you're helping me with this, or you will be, but you know about it. Because I soon discovered that there are some streets where people don't really know what they're getting, and I've found 2, Hereford Street and Albert Street in 2 particular, they've never been issued with any bags or bins or anything. They've never ever had anything. I've actually knocked on doors and taken their postcodes and then put it in and discovered they actually have a service, but they've never been issued with any bins. So they use that Cornhill bin. So I'm just wondering whether there are other little anonymies, if that's the right word, that are there, and whether there is a way of providing ward councillors with existing stuff without, obviously I could go in with postcodes and find it myself, but also what you might plan to do in our wards, because I think critical to this is actually the comms side of it. I truly believe that most people want to recycle, and it's what you said, we need to make it easy for them to do it, and they will do it. But I'm just wondering what the present situation is as well. So my street, Addington Street, I know full well that most people don't put their food waste out, and I don't know why that is. I should start asking questions. Do we know the state of play on the streets that have presently got recycling? So are we collecting from 50% of the houses? So we can bring new houses on, but do we need to look at the roads that we've existing, that are already got recycling, to work out whether we're getting their recycling? I'm just posing questions. Do we have any great ideas from residents on recycling? Have we ever asked residents? I mean, one of the ideas for seagull bags, there's a great person on Royal Road who rolls it up, flips it on her side of her fence, and then when she uses it, she flips it back out again. Simple solutions for storing some of the stuff. Could we have a red seagull bag for the mixed recycling waste? Because I can see a bag going out is going to be a massive issue on the seafront, because it will just all end up in the harbour, and then we'll be having a go at Matthew. The other Matthew. The green waste, the other Matthew. The green waste capacity, it's quite interesting that we've got a capacity for 3,000 more, because I know residents who had their green waste taken off of them for access problems, and those people would love to have their green recycling back. And I also think we sit on planning, we've got to make sure that we always bring waste up anyway, don't we? Waste and parking up. We've got to bring on maybe extra questions about where does the recycling go and where does the normal waste go when planning applications come in. And landlords, I mean, they are just a pain in the neck, some of them, aren't they? They don't manage their properties, and we end up with waste all over the place. So, sorry, just a few observations or questions.
I'll try and give a few answers. And in terms of the info, I promise you we didn't make up their numbers. That's in the presentation. So, yes, we have. A good thing about assisting Steve with this presentation has been the fact that it's kind of given us the chance to kind of do a bit of a cleanse of what we do, and I'm as confident as I've been in the last year that those numbers are where we are. So 12,218, I think it is, without having the number in front of me. So we know where they are, and if on one of the slides there was a breakdown of what their property types are. So one of the things I've said is that first of all, we've got to scope out this project and how feasible it would be, and then gather everyone's support. But assuming that we get all that, then I wouldn't want to jump into a project as big as that without having a really, really sound base of data behind me. So then we can, not attack's probably the wrong word, but address each type in turn and think Steve mentioned the phrase drip feed it in. That's what we're going to need to do. Trying to do a massive big bang across the whole of Thanet, these 12,000 properties, cause chaos. So, yeah, I'm pretty confident we have that. And those two, if you email me those 2 particular roads, I'll get back to you on those. And yet the green waste capacity is simply the fact that we had, we reached capacity on the vehicles we had, and then we had to bring on another vehicle. And again, we could have done a smaller one, but then when that fills up, everyone's saying, why did you get a smaller one? You needed a bigger one to get more customers on. And
People who lived on awkward corners.
yeah, I appreciate that. Unfortunately, as I often tell my wife, I can't please everyone all the time. So some people are it swings and roundabouts. Did I get all your questions? Is there any more?
Okay, I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to take a quick one from David Green, and then, have you got a quick one? And then Tricia, and then we'll wrap it up. David Green.
Yeah, presumably the changing funding is part of trying to make the producer pay for the system. And so it's an incentive to make manufacturers and supermarkets use less disposable packaging. So in the future, I'm not sure how effective it will be, but it should lead to you getting less plastic and more paper in our waste. Are you ready for that?
Well, first of all, happy birthday. And secondly, like I said, if the packaging changes from plastic to paper, it's still the same amount of packaging. So it's not increasing it, it's just changing how it's split up and how it's collected. I don't see that being a problem. I think really what the EPR scheme is trying to incentivise is for there to be less packaging. So less wasteful excess. If we've all had the Amazon package where you order, I don't know, a pack of chewing gum and it comes in a thing like that. The idea is to their credit, that's what they've started to do. You start to get more things in almost like envelopes now. So it's about them not changing so much the type of packaging, it's reducing the amount of packaging they use.
Councillor Guy.
Quick question. If changes were imminent, how would you tell residents about these changes?
I've got. Yeah, we would use all the current comms methods that we have, blanket out as much as we can. I think to get the buy-in, we need to minimise the amount of confusion there is. So we need to be, like always, we need to be as clear and concise as possible through as many different channels as we possibly can. I mean, the best possible way. I was at a conference last week, and one of the things was about communication. The best way of doing it is door knocking, but that's also the most expensive way of doing it because you've got to pay someone, and someone that's got to go there and engage with residents face to face. The project will need scoping to see if that's a feasibility. If we could, that would be the ultimate way of doing it. Yeah, letter drops. With the garden waste one, you saw the design up there. That was a leaflet. So, yeah, the more touch points we can get, the better.
I think, Chair, just to finish that, Chair, I think the important thing, Alan, is that it's not going to all happen at once. So because it'll be drip fed, so we do an area or streets or whatever, and then we'll see how that goes as to whether it takes off or it doesn't, and what the reaction is. So we'll be doing that. But as I say, the actual communications will be over a period of time, so we'll get people used to it.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks, Steve. Thanks, great presentation. Thank you, Matthew, as well, for your questions and answers. And then we move on. Item number 5. The Margate Harbour Arm building improvements. Call on Andrea.
Thank you, Chair. This report is in relation to the procurement and award of a contract to undertake essential improvements to the concrete roof structure and also the installation of a handrail to the upper walkway to the Margate Harbour Arm on the Stone Pier. the estimated value of the contract will be circa 320,000. As we know, the Margate Harbour Arm is both an important historic structure because it's a Grade 2 listed, and is also the home of a number of different businesses who are our tenants. The council is currently responsible for all the external and structural repairs and maintenance to the building. The building's exposure to the harsh environment in this location has increased the weathering effects to the structure. So without this crucial maintenance to the roof structure, the building will, in the near future, become very difficult to let, which will result in a loss of income to the council. In relation to the hand railings, there is currently a risk to the public who may gain unauthorised access to the roof area during busy periods. This poses both a risk in regards to the loading to the structure, but also a risk to the person itself of falling, as there is no edge protection for them. A capital budget of 320,000 has been approved to be funded from the Property Enhancement Fund in the financial year 24-25. So members of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel are today asked to note and scrutinise the report and consider the recommendations to Cabinet in advance of the meeting on the 24th of October, where Cabinet is asked to approve the recommendation to spend and award the contract, which has a value of over 250k and therefore is classed as a key decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea. Members, any questions? Councillor Pope.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. I was wondering what kind of rails are going to be installed, and if that has been successful anywhere else in Thanet in stopping people from trespassing, just because if it's similar to the rails that are on the walkie bit of the harbour arm, I think people might just jump over them. And the other thing that I wondered was if there was a timeline of when the work would be done and what the impact would be on the businesses, as it's a locals and tourist hotspot.
Thank you. So the type of railing system that's going to be installed is called a Marshall Ferrocast Heatherpole railing system. The full detail of this spec is on the planning permission, so you can have a look. But if you wanted a quick reference, they will be exactly the same as the ones who are currently in place on the lower level. So they will be in keeping with what's already there. In relation to how effective these railings would be to deter people from accessing the roof, it's hard to tell. If someone's really determined to get over, they will get over a 6-foot fence if they really want to. So it acts as a physical barrier more than sort of an impossible barrier.
Anybody else? Okay, excellent. So there's a couple of recommendations there. So are we all agreed to those recommendations? Everybody happy with that? We're all happy to note the report. Excellent, we'll send that off to Cabinet. Thanks, Ms Plant, thank you. Moving on, item number 6, the fuel supply contract. So I'm going to introduce Tony, but is it you, Matt? Okay, over to Matthew.
Hello, good evening. Yeah, unfortunately Tony couldn't join us, so he's passed it on to me to introduce. So this report is about the procurement and award of a contract for the supply of fuel at Ramsgate Royal Harbour. The estimated value of the contract will be £140,000 per year over a 7-year contract. This is for 4 years with potential for a further 3-year extension. This makes the total estimated contract value of £980,000. Ramsgate Royal Harbour owns its own fuel bars to which it can supply customers with 3 types of fuel: red flame-free gas oil, white gas oil and unleaded petrol. In order to maintain the supply, Ramsgate Royal Harbour requires a fuel contractor that can supply the above fuel at a reasonable rate within an appropriate timescale when requested. Without the supply of fuel, many of the harbour customers and visiting craft would not be able to use their boats and would therefore have to berth at different marinas. This would see a massive loss of income for the harbour. It is recommended that the Overview and Scrutiny Panel note and scrutinise the report and consider any representations it wishes to make to Cabinet in advance of its meeting on the 24th of October 2024. And the Overview and Scrutiny Panel note that and comment on the 2 proposal recommendations to Cabinet as follows. Number 1, approve the key decision to award a contract with a value in excess of 250,000 and thought to be approximately £980,000 over a 7-year period to supply the fuel at Ramsgate Royal Harbour following a procurement exercise. And 2, agree that the Director of Environment, having sought advice from legal services, agree the final terms of any contract award and sign the contract with the successful bidder.
Thanks, Matthew. Councillor Nichols.
Yeah, can I declare an interest in this, because I am a shareholder of Thanet Fuel Bunkering Services Limited, and on occasions we do sell fuel to Thanet District Council. And I can either leave the room or not. Yep, thank you.
Okay, members, any questions? Councillor Austin.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Matthew. Can you just tell me, there's reference here to the craft in the marina relying on the fuel supplies. What about other craft? What about commercial craft, the wind farms, the pilot boats and whatever? Do they get their fuel from us or do they get it elsewhere?
So there's 2 fuel suppliers in the harbour. Thanet District Council supplies a small fuel barge, which is predominantly for leisure craft. And as was mentioned, the Thanet Fishermen's Association have a commercial fuel barge which operates for the all the commercial vessels, pilot vessels, wind farms, all that sort of things.
Anybody else? Okay. So, if you all look at recommendations, do we all agree to the recommendations in the report? Yep. Okay. All good. And all note the report, please. And we'll send it off to Cabinet. Thank you, Matt. Cheers. We'd better get John back in. Okay, moving on to item number 7, the purchase of land at Eaton Road, Margate, from Southern Housing in the Housing Revenue Account. Calling Ashley to introduce the report.
Thank you. The subject of the report is the purchase of the land from Southern Housing at Eaton Place on Eaton Road in Margate. The land is currently owned by Southern Housing, and the council has been in negotiations for the past 18 months to acquire the land in order to keep the homes that are delivered on the site as affordable housing. It is important to note that the site currently has 78 units split into 2 blocks, 36 are socially rented and 42 are market rent. Southern Housing have been working hard to decamp both blocks, however only have to offer alternative accommodation to those social housing tenants. They have rehoused those tenants in other Southern Housing units, other housing association units, and TDC have rehoused 2 households. The council will not exchange contracts with the residents in situ, and the contract will ensure that the land is unencumbered. There are currently 7 households still there who Southern are working closely with. The council has negotiated an offer of £600,000 for the land. This represents excellent value at £10,000 per plot for potentially 60 properties it would likely seek to build on the footprint. This is a very important deal. Of course, Southern could have chosen to sell on the open market, which meant there would have been no affordable housing at all. So anything we deliver is additionality and a good example of partnership working with the housing associations in our area. The report also proposes the council contributes towards 50% of the demolition costs, up to a maximum of £300,000. This will ensure joint management of the demolition process. The proposed purchase does not come without risk. For example, the site does not have planning permission for replacement units. However, as the site is already residential, this is not envisaged to be an issue. It is also subject to grant funding from Homes England, but this is expected to be within the 26-29 bidding round, so also we feel this is not an issue. This paper proposes to appoint a design team to progress redevelopment designs to REBA stage 3 and 4 planning permission detailed designs.
Overview and Scrutiny Panel are asked to note and comment on the recommendations. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. Members, Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Ashley. I recall when this matter was first raised about the buildings, our understanding was that it was to do with the substrate and the land they were on that was an issue. That seems to have changed, and what comfort do we have that we're not going to be buying a pig in a poke because as a former yard?
Yeah, it's not the land that's the issue, it's the buildings. So when the buildings were being done, the developer went bankrupt mid-build, so they were left open to the elements for a number of months, even years, and they're timber framed. So they have rotted. So that's the reason for they need to be, yeah. Yeah.
What I would like to know is that when we redevelop this, will it be our building officers? Because I asked about this at the time, and apparently we contracted away I asked who signed these buildings off at the time, and it wasn't. I was told it wasn't our building officers that had signed that off.
Do you mean building control?
Sorry,
yeah, it wasn't TDC building control that
No.
that signed it off. No.
But
we will
take control of that this time, obviously. Again, only to clarify. So, thank you.
Councillor Austin.
I just want to follow that up. How do we know that there isn't a problem with the land, Ashley? I mean, obviously we know there's been a problem with the way that the building was dealt with, but have we got an engineer's report or something that can give us assurance that we know the land is sound?
Yeah, so Southern have done a lot of work on this because of the issues. They had to deal with this and another property in a different area with exactly the same issue. They've undertaken a number of surveys because obviously they didn't want to demolish it, they didn't want to have to decant it. So we've obviously had access to those surveys, and we're aware that is one of the reasons that we want to be involved in the demolition, because we feel we could also retain some of the footings.
Councillor Butcher.
Thank you. I just had a question, because I noticed there's 78 homes currently there in the flats, but we're intending to have 60. Is there a reason for the drop in the number of flats available?
No, we just haven't looked at the planning yet, or looked at what we want to put back there. So 60 is quite a safe number. We just, we could replicate what's there if that works for us, but we need to look at the layout and, and how we want to configure it. Because at the moment it's 2 beds as well, so we just need to look at what we want to put there.
No. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, not a question, Chair, but just a comment to say that it's another example of where the swapping strategy over the last 18 months to be much more on the front foot has given us opportunities like this. It's a real success story, the potential to put 60, maybe even more families in a proper residential area rather than where they would have been before, and a potential loss to the area. This could have gone commercially or gone to the private sector, and instead we've got this opportunity to take this on, so hopefully a good vindication of the strategy that we've been putting together as a council.
Anybody else? No? Do we know how long the project will take from the date we complete on purchasing the land?
No, because we obviously won't even exchange while there's residents there. I think they want to decant it by March, so then we'll do the process, and it'll take probably about 12 to 18 months to get our plans done.
It says £45,000 a year interest. I just wondered how many years it would take to get it completed.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as it's empty and we can proceed with legals, we need to demolish it as soon as we can, really.
Okay, so Councillor.
Interest will only start once we purchase it, though, so it's not from this deadline. No, good.
So any more questions? No? So can we all note the report and look at the recommendations, and are we all happy with the recommendations? Lots of nodding. Okay, we'll send it off to Cabinet. Thanks, Ashley. Cheers. Okay, moving on to item number 8, Thanet Pathfinder Projects, procurement approvals. Louise, over to you.
Thank you. Good evening. So I'm presenting a report to you this evening as part of the delivery of the Thanet Simplification Pathfinder pilot. This report is part of the formal process required for delivery of the programme.
We've been through a process to review the best procurement method for each of the Pathfinder schemes, and on the basis of the geographical location of the projects, the timescales for delivery and the value of the projects, this is our proposal. This paper relates to 4, and not 5, of the Ramsgate schemes and is a key decision on the basis it's over 250,000. This panel is asked to note and scrutinise the report and consider any representations to Cabinet in advance of its meeting on the 26th of October. The proposed recommendation to Cabinet is as follows. Cabinet is asked to authorise the procurement and award of contracts for a number of procurements for projects in the Simplification Pathfinder pilot through the SCAPE framework. The schemes are the Clock House project, Pier Yard and the Highways Works, which are now a combined scheme, and the Green Campus. Cabinet is asked to authorise the procurement and award of contract... the interventions identified in the report have already had approval for their selection in the original Future High Street Fund and Levelling Up Fund bids, and were prioritised as part of the Simplification Pathfinder Pilot Investment Plan. This report is part of the procedural requirements of the Council to gain approval for procurement. There are several steps of delivery of for these government-funded programmes following the award of funding. This includes planning permission and various cabinet permissions related to the stages of procurement, lease arrangements, disposals, management and governance of the programme. The procurement of contractors, whether they were individual contractors or under one Tier 1 contract as being proposed, would need a Cabinet decision. We are at the right stage in the project's delivery to procure the contractors for these Ramsgate projects. The project team has worked up a procurement strategy, engaged with the market and discussed the procurement strategy at relevant internal project meetings. What this report doesn't do is outline detail for each of the individual projects. There have been previous reports to this panel and also Cabinet linked into this report, and further engagement events will happen where required for each of these projects, most notably Pier Yard and Highways interventions. Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. Members, Councillor Green.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Louise, and thank you for the correspondence we've had previous to this. It turns out that I had misunderstood what was happening here. I had assumed that because we were going out to contract, that we had the final designs of these four projects. And I was concerned that we as councillors and the public hadn't seen those final designs yet. But now I understand that is still to come, which raises another question in my mind, that I don't understand how we can go out to contract with a developer without having the final designs that they're going to be quoting us for. So perhaps you could explain that. And then looking at the figures involved in the paper, I notice that the amount of money available for the 4 projects is about £1 million less than what the original bids were. And I wondered what that money was going to be used for. Has it already been spent? And if so, on what? And finally, I'm concerned in the clustering of the 4 projects together. They're all very different projects. And I wondered if one contractor is the right way to be handling this. And is there a danger in doing it this way that the money that was allocated to one project may end up being used to boost one of the other projects, such as the Green Campus that we already know is underfunded?
Thank you, Councillor Green. Sorry, I was just trying to note down all of your questions. I might just start at the bottom and then work my way back. Even though we have one contractor, each project has an individual budget. It has its own design and they are all costed up. So there won't be any movement of funding within the contractor, and the Cabinet have committed to any movement of funding within the project will come back for Cabinet approval. So although we have one contractor, the way it works, we have a number of contracts that are over all of the projects, and we end up with purchase orders with lots and lots of lines, and each line relates to an individual project. So we are able to then match back spend against specific budgets. So there won't, even though it's one contractor, there won't be movement of money within that contract. The clustering of the projects, we have engaged with the market to understand appetite on the basis of different levels of project. And it was felt that a tier one contractor with enough experience, and we've done some of that market evaluation, could cover all of those. They are all very different, but as you go up the levels in terms of contractors, you will pick up organisations that have experience. Listed buildings are not unique, and quite often within public contracts there are listed buildings. Highway schemes are not unique, and so when we're confident that the contractor will be able to pick up each of those individual elements. In terms of the funding and the money that has been spent so far within the budget, we've been working up these schemes, so there are a number of costs that the council has already incurred, so that's staff resources, project team, design teams, cost consultants, but also includes survey work. So there's been quite a lot of survey work in each of the buildings. We need all of that information to be able to build up the designs for them to then be costed. So that's where the funding is. It's quite usual to have around 10% for this kind of scheme associated with fees, and that will continue forward. The level of fees will depend on the type of scheme, the risk profile, the procurement route, and the client side resources. But when we submitted the Levelling Up Fund and all of the other Town Deal Future High Street Fund bids, they all had a percentage of that funding is allocated to fees, because otherwise you can't deliver the schemes if you don't have those specialist services. We certainly don't have them in-house, and you need to be able to call on those in order to develop the projects. In terms of going out to procurement now, even though some of the schemes aren't developed up, we've done enough design for all of them to be able to put together a costed forecast for what that scheme will look like. The project that's going at the lowest kind of REBA stage 2, is Pier Yard and the highway scheme. That has had quite a significant amount of work previously when it was just the Future High Street Fund scheme. So we know what the budget is for that. We know the kinds of designs that can be included in that, and it will be a design and build contract for that. So there is an element of continued design, and that's where that stakeholder engagement will continue to happen. We will be entering into a what's the P? Pre-construction services agreement. Sorry, I'm terrible with acronyms, with the contractor, and that's where the agreement happens around design. And we know that there are some of our design teams that will potentially move across to the construction contractor, and they may already be using some of the teams that we're working with. So it's not uncommon to have a construction contract that is at an early REBA stage, particularly if it's a design and build, and you have the relevant break clauses and the ability to input into that as part of that contract. Have I missed anything? No.
Come back.
Yes, sir.
So you won't be selecting the contractor on cost. It'll be on some other criteria. Is that right? And can you confirm that the final designs will be put before will be shown to councillors and the public before you go ahead?
So on the procurement point with the contractor, through our procurement workshops and engagement with internal governance, we have been engaging with the SCAPE framework, which is slightly different than a standard framework in that it operates on a set of rates that have already been agreed with their contractor partners. So the way that we are engaging with a contractor is on a set of rates which includes overheads and profits, which will be applied to the future construction contracts, and then the packages of works that sit underneath that, as it were, are agreed on an open book basis. So we won't have selected the contractor in terms of the pre-contract services agreement based solely on rates, because we have that confirmation, and we've gone through this with our procurement colleagues and legal colleagues, that it's a public sector framework, that those have already been demonstrated through the procurement of the framework initially, and there's all sorts of evidence that backs that up, and then each package will have to be procured in liaison with our cost consultants, who we appoint to represent our interests, to make sure that there'll be a number of quotes for each works package, and we'll be getting the best value out of those. Does that answer the question?
Yes, so we, particularly in terms of the highways in Pier Yard, obviously working with Kent County Council, there are a number of stakeholder engagement activities that we have to do, and we had quite a big event for the original Future High Street Fund scheme, so that will continue, and we will have further information online when each of those events take place in terms of the design boards, etc., which we already have for the previous engagement events, and we'll just update those, so that's available online.
For all 4 projects?
So for Green Campus, I think we've done all of the engagement. The design hasn't changed from the last engagement event. It's just been developed through to a more detailed design. And that's gone in. So Green Campus has been submitted, is going through the validation process with planning at the moment. For the Clock House, yes, we will go back out for an exhibition rather than engagement, because the scheme has had to be simplified quite a lot to meet the budget following the decision that we weren't getting any lottery funding to supplement that scheme. So it's a refurbishment of the Clock House with the food and beverage cafe at the side, but without any of the contentious elements that Historic England wasn't particularly happy with. So it's a simpler scheme. And yes, we will absolutely have another event for the highway scheme, but all of the elements that are being worked up by the design team at the moment have come from either the original Future High Street Fund scheme, the Pier Yard scheme that's already been consulted on, or other items that have been picked up through engagement with stakeholders. So there won't be any surprises in there.
I don't think the Pier Yard scheme has been consulted on with the public.
We had the original engagement event in July last year, but there hasn't been a further update, so we'll be going out again.
Councillor Wing.
Thank you, Louise. And we know from the experience of Ellington Park that parts of the project had to be shelved. I think it was the rockery when due to increased costs. I mean, for each of the projects, do we have elements that we know, well, if we go over budget, or it looks if costs are going to go up, the cost of materials is a serious issue at the moment, that we can shelve? So that's one question. Do we have elements that we can pull out without affecting the whole issue? Also, with a single contractor, are we not at risk, it's following on from Councillor Green, are we not at risk of seeing the work subcontracted and therefore losing maybe a bit of control, direct control, because it goes to somebody else? And also, will the construction consider green energy and also be as carbon neutral as possible, which is pretty difficult to do? And given our applications have yet to go in, although one's already in, have we considered 10% biodiversity net gain that will be a requirement for all new planning applications? So it'd be good to see some trees on the pool.
Thank you. So we've done an awful lot of work. We've recommissioned a new cost consultancy team, and we have gone through all of the designs, all of the cost plans, and really checked and challenged those. So there is a layer of contingency that sits within those plans, both project and client contingency. And we have been doing the value engineering process as we go along. So we are as close as we can be in terms of our expectation that what we now have at the stages of design meet the budget. Whether there is future discussions, because between now and the actual contracting of the contractor, we will have to pick those things up. We have tested this debate about the Green Campus. Do we make it, do we stick to the footprint and make it a more simpler scheme with less green credentials necessarily, or do we stick to our original proposals around the scheme in terms of its credentials and its aims, but have a smaller footprint? So we're sticking with a smaller footprint to make sure that we do the things that we said that we wanted to do as part of the programme. So all the way through all of these projects, there's that element of value engineering, checking and challenging, and that's why it's important to have a client-side cost consultancy team that work with you on that, and we've got a really good team working with us at the moment. So that's that question. In terms of the benefits of having a single contractor, where we are now really squeezed in terms of timeline, what it means is they are doing all of that phasing as one organisation. So all of their health and safety and CDM requirements sit with one contractor in a very tight geographical space, yes, so they potentially have one welfare block, they potentially have one site compound, all of those things. They're also in control of all of those vehicles and movement because they are the main contractor. Whereas if we had gone out and had a number of individual contracts per project, all of that health and safety and CDM requirement would probably sit with us as the client. So that risk is reduced, and is one of the reasons why we felt that going for a contractor like this was the best route. And as Lucia said, there are elements of subcontracting that go out, but that's in engagement with us through Scape. And the main contract will have an element in it around green and sustainability, and obviously we will need to look at the 10% net gain. I'm not sure we can necessarily plant trees at the port. We could build some, we'll build some. But yeah, that's all being picked up.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say, I think I'm more confused than ever here, because I'm going to ask some pointed questions here. We've been advised before that, for example, the money wasn't available for fishing facilities because of the outcome wasn't sufficient. There's this whole thing about what is the outcome, is it feasible, what's the business case? And here we are talking 3 years in about a pier yard project that would actually prejudice against the functioning of the slipways and the fishing facilities as they are, let alone if they're improved. We've got a green hub. Do we have a business case? What are we expecting?
Break it down and answer your questions.
phase 1 and 2. What are these phases? Because this hasn't been set out and it hasn't been consulted on. So, and to lump these 4 projects in together causes great confusion because they're not all equally viable and valid. So consequently, if you wanted to hold one of them and take it out because it wasn't there, having approved everything, we're just creating this juggernaut to roll along. And I think we need to think very long and hard. There was much talk earlier in the year about our procurement process, taking fire breaks, breathers and reviewing it. And I think we need to do that because from what I'm seeing, we're just spending money for the sake of it. I've had a lot of contact from very concerned people in the community about what's going on here. And, you know, hopefully I can get some answers and that might, you know, how can we even think of entering into a binding contract with a contractor when we don't know what it's going to look like, so we can't have a spec? It makes no sense whatsoever to me. And I'm sorry, but I feel that strongly that it needs to be stated. There's no match funding. There would have been match funding available. I'm aware of sources that were very keen to get involved with the Green Campus. Let's go back to what it was described as, a green campus. The opportunity was there for this to be a research centre working with the wind farms, mining the data. There were PhD hours available from UCL, all ignored. All ignored. And I don't believe this is acceptable.
Just take a breath. Louise.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I have to say I'm not entirely sure of the questions. What I'm going to try and do is answer some of the concerns. So, as I said, this report isn't about the detail of the projects, it's about the procurement process. The projects have already been approved. If we were going to amend those projects or take them out, then this would be a different Cabinet report. So we are delivering against those approved projects that have been both to Cabinet and central government. They're approved by central government and we have an agreement with them for delivery. So this report is about the procurement exercise. I'm not sure where in the report we show that there is an issue for access to fishing facilities or access to the slipways. They all form part of the briefing of the design teams. As we've discussed, that has been part of the engagement event that was last summer, and then there was a place plan workshop that was held at our site in Broad Street, which I know you attended, Councillor Davis, and we looked at various parts of the place plan and how, and we got feedback from various organisations, and many of this panel were at that meeting. So the plan is still that Ramsgate Harbour is a working harbour and it requires access, and so that is part of the design. As I said, the detail is not in this report because that's not what it's for. It is very common to have contracts at this stage, at REBA stage 2, when it's a design and build element. And as I said, the pre-contract services agreement picks up that process. So we have that agreement with the contractor through the design stages as we move into the formal contracting. I think the last thing around match funding and the Green Campus, I'm assuming that the match funding point was specifically at that. When we submitted the Levelling Up Fund bid, we had some close engagement with one of the wind farm operators who had indeed talked about providing match funding. That organisation has whole-scale changed since those initial discussions, and they are being operated by a different organisation. We have continued to have discussions with them, and that stakeholder engagement will continue on as we go through the, as we move from the design process to agreeing the model of management. That the model of management for any of the assets that include bringing in a third-party operator will go through to Cabinet for approval, because it will undoubtedly require more than a 7-year lease. So it will be a decision for Cabinet, so that will go through a formal approval process. We haven't stopped the elements of thinking about who might be within the Green Campus at all, which is why we stuck with the bit around having a smaller footprint but keeping the kind of raison d'etre of the building, to make sure that we can continue those discussions. We're a very small team, and there's been quite a lot of focus on getting these projects to this point so that we can deliver them within the timescales set out by central government. We are working up what those models of management will look like, and there will be further discussion of those. But at the moment, the focus is particularly around design, and I think we talked about at a previous meeting here, we did a prior information notice where we went out to the market to identify what operators of green campuses and or similar would need out of a building, and would how they would engage with a more formal procurement process should we go through one. And that has been used to inform this design process.
Councillor Scobie.
Thank you, Chair. And I think if residents were listening to this, I think they would assume that we're talking about negative developments. You know, we need to consult more. There's not enough money. We've got too many contractors, too few contractors. The process is too convoluted. This is good news. You know, I've sat in so many meetings in Thanet where we were talking about, oh, we really need to put money into our assets, bring more money, and this is money coming in, and that means that there's complications. But, you know, I think we do need to keep reiterating that. Thanet Council gets enough negativity, and we should be talking positive. And that doesn't mean that there aren't challenges here. But I've said this at previous meetings, and I think we do, again, need to repeat this every time. This is not our officers and the council delaying things or making wrong decisions or you know, not spending the money fast enough or wasting money. This funding was allocated as large pots of money without proper notice, without all of the documents you usually get with these sorts of grants given out. They were given out just as large amounts of cash, including this year, where we got money in the budget that we didn't know and had to spend days, if not weeks, trying to work out whether we got it or not and whether it referred to money that was already given. The way this money has been allocated is where these problems come from. Because we're a small district council, we don't have the project management or the procurement experience. We've had to build that up over time. And it's a credit to what's been done in recent years by different administrations to actually spend this. If you want to understand where the gaps in funding have come from, because there have been delays because of the lack of proper planning and governance challenges with how this money is spent, which has meant that we haven't been able to spend it fast enough, so inflation's then bitten into it. So we've had to constantly change these projects. Normally projects like this would be planned out over years, and we've had to do a lot of small changes in a small space of time. So I take the points that colleagues are making and the frustration, but I do think we as a panel need to reflect the fact that this is positive news. Our staff are doing really good work to, let's face it, deal with a positive hospital pass, if I can use that phraseology. And, you know, I would certainly be opposing, Chair, any sort of recommendation to scrutiny that criticises what's happening, because I think actually the council is doing really good stuff to turn what could have been a point where we were spending barely any of this money and potentially losing even more to inflationary pressures. We're actually in a position where we're moving these projects forward, and I think that's a real positive. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I think what we do hear a lot from the public is what our Thanet Council doing with that 50 million, and I think if this is one step forward to seeing diggers on the ground, I think that's a positive. Councillor Green.
Councillor Scobie is right. This is good news, and Louise and her team have done an amazing job to get these projects to this point. But local councillors in Ramsgate are going to have to live with particularly the highway scheme and the pier yard scheme forevermore. We're not going to get this money again. So all I want is is for the final designs of those two projects in particular to be put before us before we're actually fully committed to to how they're going to appear.
And I'm sure they're coming. I'm sure they're coming. Councillor Nichols, is your agenda?
Yeah, thank you. I'm really concerned about the design and final design for the Pier Yard car park and the piazza. I mean, when we were approached or spoke about this 6-9 months ago, the fishing industry was told as a commercial user and passer through of the car park that we would get time slots which we could go through and unload our fish. It's imperative that we have 24/7 access dealing with live fish, shellfish and other species, roundfish. We can't have time slots, and really I need to know, do the fishing industry, along with the slipways, the gentleman that rents the big shed by the hover pad there, the old hover pad, and the end of the pier, workshops, fish storage area and restaurant, are they going to have 24/7 access? It's part of me laying down a foundation this evening that we get that 24/7 access.
So can I just fill back? Did you say there was another consultation event for the Pier Yard? And there is. I mean, there's your opportunity there. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Louise and the Chair. I just wanted to ask about timescales, and I know we've talked about this endlessly, but when do we expect that the contract will be awarded? What's the process and the timescales from there on? I also wanted to ask you to reassure me that by going through this SCAPE framework, they will deal with all the management of trying to run lots of projects at the same time while impacting on existing users, residents, businesses, etc., etc., etc. And then I wanted to say one thing which follows on from various things that Councillor Green and others have said, which is there is a distinction between informing the council and informing residents. And we must stick to that. We are not the public, we are the council. We must have information, we must know what's happening before residents do. We can't just be invited to an event the day before residents and that's enough. It's not enough. We need, as soon as there is stuff that is going through officers' planning, we need to know about it, particularly those of us obviously who are ward councillors in those wards, but more generally it is something that this council does not do well and consistently, and good councils always do. They make sure that councillors are the first to know. I'm not having a go at you guys here. This is a general thing about this council in comparison with councils I worked in as an officer, but also with best practice. So that's not anything I expect you to answer, but the other things I'd be grateful for some information on.
So the pre-contract services agreement, I forgot it then again, is imminent. And I'm pushing the team for being in contract by the end of the calendar year. But, you know, there's still some hoops to jump through once we've got this approval. There's still some work to be done. The works contract will then, you know, the works will then follow, but when designs are fully finalised. And as Lucia said, Green Campus has gone in for planning. We are talking to the planning and conservation team about the clock house because it will require planning and listed building consent. That shouldn't take too long. And then it's just the Pier Yard and highway scheme, which are currently at REBA stage 2. So they're not that far away from being finalised and ready for further engagement. And the relevant planning stroke highways permissions. In terms of engagement, obviously we've got all of the councillor briefings in, and we are looking at when is it most suitable to come and bring regeneration schemes alongside some of the other things that need to come forward for councillor briefing sessions. But yeah, that's our plan. There's kind of slots for regeneration. It slips a bit if we aren't quite ready to bring something new, so it's not just lots of updates, but that's what we're working on at the moment. Oh, sorry, yes. Yes, was that about them managing all of the... Yes, yes, they will. And yes, and that will be important as part of the contract with them. The work in the PCSA agreement looks at phasing and thinking about what's got the longest construction period and how the others can fit in. So the one that will probably have the most impact is actually the highways and pier yard scheme, because that is the one, that's the one that covers quite a large area and will also impact different activities, whereas the clock house is relatively discrete, and obviously Green Campus is on the port.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Can I just ask you one question? I know, remember we had the last briefing on the highways. There was a lot of comments from councillors of what they thought was wrong and what they thought weren't changing. And one of them, I mean, every time I drive down Madeira Hill and I think, oh, this is all going to be changed soon, will you move those bus stops? And I think the idea was, someone said, can you put them around in Leopold Street? And while we're doing all those changes, maybe it's a good time to move those bus stops. Are they going to be moved?
That might be the dream. Obviously, I can't talk for Stagecoach. It is some engagement we have had in the past, and it is some engagement we are reigniting now that the scheme has been pulled together. We've got the broader place plan that we have done some engagement on, and the idea would be to move those bus stops, but it is absolutely Stagecoach are the main stakeholder in that, and we have to engage with them.
So they choose where the bus stops are, do they? Okay. I know if this is an idea to make it all very safe for pedestrians and the flow of people between the harbour and the high street. I just think if those bus stops weren't there, things will be a hell of a lot safer. That's just my opinion. I don't know if anybody else agrees on it. Ramsgate councillors agree. Right, anybody else? Are we all happy with the recommendations? Councillor Green? Okay.
That we ask Cabinet to ensure that the highway scheme and pier yard in particular, the final designs are put before councillors for information at least.
We're going to have a briefing session. Okay, can we all note the report then? Thank you. Thanks, Louise. Moving on to item number 9, the new policy for adoption and acquisition and disposal of property. Call on Andrew again. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I'm hoping this mic doesn't have such an echo, so you can hear me better now. This is the Council's shiny and new acquisition and disposal policy, which has been developed to provide a clear framework to identifying and managing surplus property and assets. This policy is extremely important for us as it aligns the property disposals with the Council's broader financial, operational and strategic goals. This way we can ensure that the capital receipts are reinvested effectively as part of our overall capital strategy and asset management planning. This policy will act as a reference document which houses various commercial property principles, such as achieving best value under Section 123 of the Local Government Act 1972, as well as detailing various disposal methods, such as disposal to specialist purchasers, disposals and planning permissions, the principles behind the release or variation of land covenants, public open space and common land considerations, as well as land exchanges, easements, wayleaves, general principles for acquisitions, and an entire array of other general issues. Therefore, members of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel are asked to review and scrutinise the proposed policy and provide recommendations to Cabinet ahead of the meeting, where it is recommended that this policy is adopted. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Members, any questions? Councillor Scobie.
Ongoing question I've had whenever we have a policy, down for review every 2 years. Is that just councillors reviewing it, or is that management reviewing it every 2 years?
It is a mixture, so if we are making considerable changes to the policy, we would most likely bring it back. However, if it's just an update, and sometimes the review at 2 years identifies no significant changes, in which case it will just be reviewed, noted in CMT minutes, as well as property working group if necessary. So it's a mixture. Depends if there's been any significant legislative changes or anything within the policy we feel we might need to change.
If I can just come back, Chair. Just say it's something that I've spoken to Mr Porter about before, but I think all policies should be reviewed annually. I'm not sure why Thanet Council has 2, 3 or even 4-year policy reviews, I think, annually, but that's not a point for now. The other question I had was a bit more of a nuanced point, was just at what point do we move the value of assets for disposal on our balance sheet over to current assets or the local government equivalent? Is there a point where we consider that their value is essentially equivalent to cash? Just because I'm wondering where that point moves from in terms of our assets.
So we have an ongoing yearly review of all of our accounting capital valuation. So we do have a value on each of our assets, regardless of it being land or building itself. We do keep a note and track of all of those values. The point where we consider the value of that property as a direct equivalent for cash is when we declare that property surplus. There's two steps in that. So you can be a property that's been declared surplus, and there's also a property that's been declared held for sale. There are different accounting principles, and there's certain bits of regulation that need to hit exactly to be able to say that we're holding the asset as surplus or we're holding it as held for sale.
Yeah. Anybody else? Councillor Wing.
I read through it twice, and the first time through I didn't see community transfer, but it's there under point 5, I think, so I was glad to see that the community transfer and right to buy is still in there. But I felt overall reading the document a second time that it's heavily weighted towards maximising profits, making money basically. And I'm a bit concerned that it does not have the necessary safeguard to ensure there is an appropriate reason for disposal of what is essentially public property. I mean, everything belongs to the public, belongs to everybody. I've got general principles for disposal, but I can't see in this document what process do we use to make an evaluation of a property for disposal. So at what point does property A suddenly become okay to dispose of? What process of evaluation are we using on our property to make the decision to get rid of it? I also, in writing this document, did we consider some of the previous disposals, some of which have been positive, for example the Granville, some of which in our ward have been absolutely negative, the Western Undercliff Cafe and the Westcliff Hall. And the Western Undercliff Cafe is one where this drive for maximising profit actually has resulted in a space, be it being derelict and dangerous. Actually, it's your ward. It's on the boundaries of both of us. Whereas we could have sold it for 30,000 less to a group that would have got the cafe up and running. So I'm wondering whether this document actually takes into account lessons from the past, and whether we're going to. I couldn't see where it was built into this document. So the two things are, how do we evaluate that a property is now, we need to get rid of it? And is it just a financial thing, so it's making money, we can't keep it, or is there some social element? How important is it to the residents of Thanet? And then have we applied lessons from the past? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the first part of the question around how a property becomes surplus, that's listed under point 4 in the policy, and it's sort of there's got 4 principles. An asset becomes surplus when it's no longer required for the day-to-day provision of service, or a number of options below must be considered. The effective and efficient management for the reuse of that building, because clearly if it's no longer needed, we need to rethink about it and how we're going to use it as something else. So if they're reused within the council or a partner organisation or the public body, if that's not possible, then we go to step 2, disposal to help. Could that be a disposal to help facilitate the capital programme, which aims, by minimising the maintenance or the vacancy or the holding costs and liabilities we have with that property, and any consequential revenue implications that property may have on the council's budget. And lastly, we could consider a property a surplus where the property requires such significant capital expenditure, and if that capital expenditure were to have been invested in the property, it would not translate in the equivalent capital receipt. So exactly, you're investing more money than what the property would be worth with the money invested in it. So there is no business case that can be built around it to justify that financial investment. That being said, I'm going to just slide into point 2 because it does feed really, really nicely into this. So it would not be appropriate for me to comment on historic decisions and historic disposals. However, I have firsthand lived through some of the consequences of historic disposals, and I have taken some learning points, which is specifically why you will see planning as one of the considerations within this disposal. So I'm suggesting there is more emphasis of looking at what is possible on a piece of land and getting, in most instances, getting an outline planning permission if a full planning permission is not possible, so we can guide our purchasers into what we can see happening there. I'm not saying that our vision is the only vision, but at least it's a guidance to what's the art of possible within a building. And also giving them a bit more certainty that they're not taking on a property and they're solely bearing the risk of not being able to get planning permission for what they need. So that's why planning is one of the considerations in the disposal policy from learning points.
Just come back on the first bit. So is there ever a situation, because this is a public building and we have something called social profit, so that we've got building A is used heavily by the local people for whatever, okay? So there is a social value attached to that, which I believe sometimes outweighs a financial loss. Is there anywhere built into this that would assess, so building A needs 30,000 spent on it, we know we're not going to get the 30,000 back, but the benefit to the local community is absolutely massive in addressing deprivation, youth crime. So I guess I'm saying, is there ever a situation where we weigh up the social benefits alongside the financial gains in terms of disposing a building we can't look after?
The short answer is indirectly yes, but not through financial investment in works the property, but through the community transfer. So the community transfer considers the social, community and public purposes of a building and the benefits of that service in instances where this is deemed to outweigh the value of continuing ownership for the council. And that community transfer could be via a whole array of different venues, via license, via lease, via all sorts of different types of disposals. Disposal doesn't automatically mean sale in perpetuity. It takes a whole array of different forms, and I think the policy also addresses that. But the community transfer, which is addressed here, does note that in some instances, on a case-by-case situation, there would be cases where the value of that building outweighs what the building is worth to the council. So it's aimed at releasing some of this ownership into the community where we have certainty that the community or the intended user is able to sustainably maintain that building for the foreseeable future. And it's not just a sort of passion project that's temporary and transient.
I guess I'm going to keep asking the question. Imagine the pie factory was owned by TDC. I know it's not. It's owned by KCC and they're getting rid of it. I think we'd sit around this table and say, right, this building is too expensive to run. We need to get rid of it. I don't think that would happen at TDC, because I think we would make the decision that the social impact and positiveness of having a youth club, happens to be in my ward, but it could be anywhere, would stop a disposal, and we would see that loss of capital investment as a social benefit, as something that and I know I'm using the wrong example because we don't provide youth services, but I guess I'm trying to ask, is there any situation when we would rather invest in a building than get rid of it?
Thank you for touching on Pie Factory. We've got currently a very good example of that, which we are working on, which is Millmead Children's Centre. That is a building that is owned by us, and that's the exact kind of approach that we're taking. We're looking at supporting that building because we recognise the benefits of that building and the service that is provided within that building, not necessarily the building itself. And it's a matter of sort of principle that Cabinet can decide on these matters, and if it's something that we feel very strongly about, that support is needed. What this policy, and I think I've also made sure that it's written down, it doesn't commit the council to one size fits all for our asset. So it gives us enough flexibility to be able to make those judgment calls that's kind of the granular detail can never be captured in a policy like this unless we make it 500 pages long, which we don't want.
Thank you, Andrew. It's really appreciated.
Councillor Davis. Thank you, Chair. Good report, Andrea, thank you. One thing I didn't notice within the protocols was any mention of a check on covenants. Historically, we have a horrendous record with not picking up and ignoring covenants. There's a big row going on, I believe, at Tivoli at the moment over it. And despite what other people have said, there was a covenant on the Pleasure Armour site. But hey, let's not get into that at the moment. What stage and how do you check that? Is there a standard search procedure or what? Because our records seem to be pretty ropey when it comes to covenants. So.
There's a few things. There's no steadfast rule as to at which point in a disposal you do a title research to check all the covenants. Covenants tend to be obscure. Sometimes land registry themselves don't have these covenants available for immediate download, so sometimes we have to wait weeks, if not months, for these documents to be mailed by post to us from the land registry. So we wouldn't necessarily hold up something in terms of getting a decision to be able to progress with a disposal for that land, that title report. So in an ideal world, we will carry out all of the title research beforehand, but there would be instances where the kind of finer covenants will only kind of emerge after we've made a decision to dispose of it. That being said, we're not alone in this. This happens all throughout the country, and we what we can do, sometimes the land registry don't have the records for that covenant, just it notes that there has been a covenant at some point. What happens in that instance, we would seek to take out a covenant indemnity policy, which will cover us for any future claims against the council.
Thanks for that. That's really interesting, and also the feedback about having the hard copies, because I know there was nationally a real debacle because a lot of covenants weren't recorded when they digitised at the land registry. So, but no, good to hear, and as I say, thank you.
Councillor Nichols.
Yeah, it was just a quick one to cover a couple of questions asked earlier. Down at Broadstairs Harbour, we took over the old wooden building, the boathouse at Broadstairs, a few years ago off Thanet District Council / Broadstairs Town Council, because it needed tens of thousands of pounds spending on it. All the storeholders, we formed a CIC, and this is a typical example where the council has sold us the building for £100. We can't dispose of it. There's a lot of terms and conditions. The building comes back to the council should at any time we fail or don't want to carry on with the work. And in the meantime, we do the building up and control it and control its finances. But that works very, very well under a CIC. And this is a typical example of something that could have been sold for flats, or it could have been sold for anything, but we managed to get it, and that is a very, very good example going forward of a community interest company. Thank you.
Anybody else? We all done?
Chair, could I just make a comment, please? Just to come back on Councillor Scobie's question earlier about review periods, just to say that we do have now a policy manager in the organisation that is in the transformation service, reporting to Hannah Thorpe. Richard Knight, his name is, and he has oversight of all of the council's policy documents, working with service managers and heads of service to make sure that we're following a common format in our policy review work. One of the things that is included in the work that Richard's been doing is review periods, and he has brought paper to the corporate management team, setting out and seeking our approval for a review process. So on review periods, the guidance that Richard set out for us and that we're working for, and I'll just read it to you now, is that documents should be reviewed following new legislation or regulation, which happens at different periods, sometimes shorter or longer intervals, to reflect a new corporate strategy or priority. So if the council changes its corporate plan or a corporate key strategy document that are approved at full council, then policies that flow from that, we would review them as per the existing policies review period. So every policy that comes through would say this policy needs to be reviewed every 12 months, every 24 months, or whatever it is, depending on the content of that policy and depending on the level of risk that's associated with the issues with it that are contained within that policy. And finally, when it's just clearly out of date. Sometimes things just clearly are out of date and need to be updated. So policy would come forward for review on one of those bases. And I'm sure, as a councillor, you'd want assurance that we are doing that. And I know Richard's working on some processes about how we can give assurance that we are reviewing policies in accordance with those guidelines. So hopefully that helps.
Thanks, Bob. Okay, we're all done. We're all looking at recommendations. We're all happy with those recommendations that this acquisition disposal policy is implemented. Yeah? Excellent, thank you. Okay, moving on. Thanks, Andrew. Item number 10, purchase of caged waste vehicles. I call on Matt.
Hello again. This report proposes the planned purchase of 6 new 7.5 tonne cage tipper vehicles. These vehicles form a part of the rolling vehicle replacement programme and are required to replace equivalent vehicles which have reached the end of their planned working life. In line with the Council's net zero strategy, our intention was to investigate the possibility of all of these vehicles being electric powered. However, a combination of factors meant that a full electric cage fleet was not possible. These factors were a very narrow market for EV versions of these vehicles. After extensive research, only 2 suitable vehicles were found with the required range. The cost. The capital cost of purchasing these vehicles is more than twice that of a diesel-powered one. The lack of infrastructure. The power supply into the depot is currently insufficient to serve the required high-capacity chargers. And the actual range. Whilst manufacturers claim these vehicles in question have the required range, it is yet to be tested in a real working day in Thanet. With these considerations in mind, it was decided to recommend purchasing 2 electric-powered tipper vehicles and 4 7.5-tonne combustion engine diesel vehicles via a compliance procurement route using funding allocated for that purposes in the 2024-25 vehicle replacement programme. Appendix A of the report provides more detail on the vehicle research undertaken and how we have assessed the required vehicle range. While the electric vehicles will cost more than the £80,000 per vehicle allocated in the rolling vehicle replacement programme, the diesel versions are expected to be less than the provision. However, some reprofiling of funds will be necessary from £480,000 to £590,000 in total, subject to Cabinet's approval of the recommendations in the report. That reprofiling of funding can be managed within the existing approved 2024-25 budget, so no extra funding will be required. We have started the process of assessing how best to increase the capacity of the power supply to the depot, assessing solutions for the short, medium and long term, and how this can be incorporated into the developments at Manston Road. Separately from the proposed vehicle purchases, we have recently been investigating the use of hydro-treated vegetable oil fuel, or HVO, which is a bio-based fuel which has a low carbon alternative to standard white diesel. Due to the way that it is produced, this type of diesel reduces the emissions by up to 90% in comparison to standard diesel. The price of HVO has come down steadily over the last 18 months to the point where the difference between it and standard diesel is now only around 15%. It is fully mixable and with normal white diesel, and all of the manufacturers have confirmed the support for its use and it will not affect our warranties. Appendix B of the report provides more detail on this work and the proposed trial using selected vehicles from our existing fleet. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have for me. None? Okay, let's go.
Not getting away that lightly. Councillor Nichols.
Yeah, thank you for that report. On HVO, what grade of HVO would that be?
I come in there. If I understand what you're asking, Councillor, is this is second generation fuel. Is that what you're asking? So it's not first generation biodiesel. It's second generation fuel, which is made from waste plant matter or animal fats through hydro treatment. Is that the question?
Can I come back? Yeah, I mean HVO can be made from a number of sources. It can also be made from palm oil, which is not the source that you would want to use. But HVO comes in various grades, and if you go to HVO 100, that will be double the price. HVO 1525, when available, and as a fishing industry, we've been trying to get it for a number of years now. It's very difficult to get hold of. The supply is no continuity of supply at the moment, and the very low grades 25 might be 15-20% more, but if you go up to HVO 100, then you will double the cost.
Nothing to say. I don't know. You're obviously more of an expert than we are.
Yeah, I'm dealing with HVO every day of the week at the moment down at Ramsgate Harbour for various people.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say, I think this is broadly a pretty good compromise between trying to cover off the council's responsibilities under net zero and trying to make it operationally fair. The only question I had was whether these all need to be replaced now. So obviously, if you're working on the basis that we want to purchase 6 of these vehicles, this is the right solution. But I drive an electric car, I have done for 4 years, and I'm looking at a new car at the moment. And compared to the market 4 years ago, the amount of cars that are on offer, the range, the different options that are there in such a small period, this technology is moving forwards at such a rate of knots that almost there may be an argument to say that a non-decision here or a partial decision is better, because at some point I'm trying to work out the dates in this. If this is 7 years is sort of the expected life cycle, how close does that get us to the point where we're going to be having to significantly up our climate change responsibilities? And I wonder whether it may be worth, or whether it has been considered, because that a partial decision may be the appropriate action here.
Yes, so in terms of whether they need to be replaced, now they probably needed to be replaced about a year ago in terms of the operational function of them. I mean, I think we've kind of tried to do what you're saying there. Like I say, ideally we would have gone for the whole electric fleet, but we had to try and balance up the risk of taking a step into practically into the unknown, because we've not got any of these vehicles. I kind of jokingly said to someone else that I wear 2 different hats. If I'm sat in Cecil Street, I'm the head of cleansing, but if I'm set over at Manston Road, I'm responsible for the sort of day-to-day operations. And we needed to find a balance between making sure we could deliver the service as it is at the moment and continue that high performance while taking our first steps towards electric. I think if we were to postpone everything and just do it in 7 years' time, we could have potentially wasted everything and not really have had any real data to work with in terms of research into doing the next stage to get us over the line towards net zero.
And just wanted to come back and just thank you for the answer. And as I said, I think this is the right step forward, and it's a good compromise between them. And I thank you for your explanation.
Thank you.
Councillor Bright first.
Yeah, thank you. How confident are you that HVO is going to be successful? What's the likelihood that we are just going to end up with 4 diesel vehicles for the next 7 years? I mean, I've just done a quick Google and I can see that there are other councils that are successfully using it. I'm just wondering what research you've done as well. Thank you.
Again, you've almost preempted my answer. Yes, some other councils locally as well are using it. And essentially that's what our trial is for. At Manston Road, we're lucky we have 2 separate diesel tanks. So we are going to get a supply of HVO and test it in our current vehicles that we have data for in terms of the fuel consumption and what their mileage is per full tank, and have a real accurate live test with our vehicles in our conditions. The reports I've got, and I'll bow to other people in the room that have used HVO far more than I have, is that it's been very successful, and we will obviously report back on how this trial goes and what the effect that will have on our future diesel purchases. We're actually getting it from the same company that provides our standard diesel. So if it's really successful and the price of it is fits into our budgeting, then we can kind of turn the supply on or off, depending on, as long as they've got the availability. At the moment, they said is not really an issue.
Okay, and then in the meantime, are we going to sort of plough on with improving the infrastructure, so we are going to be able to accommodate a fully sort of electric fleet in the future? And also, are there any, I don't know if it's not going to be relevant in 7 years' time when we need to renew our fleet, but are there any funding opportunities available from the government for this? Because I know that obviously cost is an issue for electric vehicles, but have you looked into sort of funding and grants and things? Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of the power supply, we're currently undergoing a load test to see what spare capacity in terms of the power we have coming in to the depot is at the moment. From there, we'll be able to speak to UK Power Networks about what changes could be made to our current substation, and we would look at what it would take and what it would cost, probably more importantly, to get, say, 2, 4, 6, 10 new chargers in place. There's, from what I understand, there's a point at which that substation can be maxed out, and then we would have to invest in a brand new one, which is obviously a much, much larger thing. But to do the whole fleet, we will have to take that bigger step. So for us, it's a case of balancing up how much we can get from the current substation and how much that would cost, and at what point we change the substation altogether, and how that all fits into our plans of improvements at Manston Road as it is. In terms of the funding, I've not seen anything as of yet. I get enough emails about this sort of thing to probably be in the know if one does come across. And as always, if anyone comes across anything, please let me know. I'll happily investigate it and see what we can do.
Councillor Nichols.
Thank you. If you want any help with HVO, we can help you a lot with that. Also, there's a lot of information available from the Port of London Authority, who have been using HVO for a number of years and were in the trials. Engines run a lot cleaner, and when you open them all up and look inside, they're a lot cleaner. But one of my questions, or my question is to yourself, have we looked at any form of hybrid? It's a very good intermediate step between what you've got now, an all-diesel vehicle, to an all-electric vehicle. And of course, the range is endless, because if you run out of the electric power, you've got the diesel power to back up. So your services to the public aren't going to be let down. Thank you.
Yes, we did look. For whatever reason, the 7.5 ton cage tipper vehicle seems to be, with that sort of range, the market is incredibly small. For smaller cage vehicles, 3.5 ton or even smaller ones, which is coming up in our replacement programme, I wouldn't say that the options are endless, but at a recent event I went to, I went round and spoke to 5, 6 different suppliers of those kind of vehicles and organised trials of them for next year when we're looking to replace them. But there was one single vehicle there that fitted our bill, but certainly none that were hybrid.
Just to say that I welcome the comparison, because you used a phrase earlier about real world comparison when we were talking about whatever we were talking about. With the best will in the world, you can see it from the manufacturer's quoted figures against what they actually turn out, and there's always that differential, whatever the fuel. I'm not convinced that all electric is the way this world's going to end up, and I think there's a real need for a blend and a transition rather than a jump. So I welcome the fact that you're using it on a cautionary basis, let's say, because we could be investing an awful lot of money in infrastructure just for everything to suddenly do a U-turn. Because as you said, and as Councillor Scobie said, 4 years ago, completely different world. So 4 years from now, who knows? But no, so well done, welcome it, Matt. Great report.
I think the Euro, thank you. I think the Euro 6 diesel vans use the blue ad or the AdBlue, so it eliminates some of that particulate going out. So they're healthier than, more environmentally friendly than a straightforward diesel van. With the electric vehicles, I mean, it's all new technology, and the one thing that worries me is fires, because they're not really fires. It's a thermal runaway. So a thermal runaway which doesn't need oxygen, and water won't put it out. So have we put in place extra sort of precautions, particularly at the tip end, at the yard end, to ensure that we have fire protocols in place for electric vehicle fires. The last thing I want to say is, can we name these vans? So I've got Wendy Waste Wagon, Trash Gordon, Binderella, Lord of the Bins, Bin Crosby and Binny. Oh, could we involve... Becky's bin lorry, yeah.
Councillor Wing, you obviously have too much time on your hands. We've been doing ever from before when I started, there's been improvements at the depot that have been ongoing, and every time we've made an improvement, there's been a fire risk assessment that's gone with that. So, just for example, off the top of my head, we recently rearranged the way that the vehicles were parked. Still in the same, literally almost going from being that way round to that way round. Yeah. And we did a full assessment with that to make sure there was required gaps between all the vehicles and stuff like that. And any tipping facilities we have there has to be a minimum distance between that and another fixed structure. Obviously, we haven't got the charging points in place. Technically, no one's even agreed to this yet. So, but rest assured, when we do, yes, there will be a full assessment and make sure that as Matt just whispered in my ear, it's also an insurance requirement that we do these things. So, yeah, it will all be taken into consideration.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Cheers. So, members, just look at the recommendations there. You're happy with the recommendations? Just naming the bin lorries, yeah. Okay, all right. Come on, we're nearly there. Okay, thanks, Matt. Item number 11, the review of the overview and scrutiny work programme. The external grant funding review is near conclusion. Unfortunately, it's still with the CMT to do a report on that, and hopefully we'll bring that back. I'll let you say something interesting. We're bringing it back in the next meeting for a review on that. During the last meeting, there was a lot of member support for the next review, which I believe we all decided were going to be about youth services in Thanet. Yeah, we all happy with that. So we need to put a working group together for that. Hold hands over that. I know you were really keen because I know you asked some questions at full council. Can I put you in charge of that? And then,
you have the right to.
if so, we could just put it together. Obviously, when you meet, if you want to change the chair, that's fine. If I put Joanne in charge, and if you let Joanne know if you want to be involved in it, between 5 and 7 people, put your working group together, and we'll talk about next month how you're going. Because on next month, we were going to invite Councillor Bright, Mr. Bright, to talk about the parking review, but I don't think that's going to be settled before then. So there's no point in coming because I know he won't be able to refer to it. So we're going to have Councillor Keane back again to talk about youth services. It'll all tie in next month with the review. Okay, so I'll come back to Tricia now to talk about your grant funding review.
I was just going to say the report is done, it's submitted, and whatever, we're just waiting for feedback from management team. That's where we are.
As opposed to the other subjects, because obviously we had biodiversity as a subject, event management as a subject. I think that we're going to do those as an officer or cabinet member presentations, but we're going to be into next year by now. And so, Councillor Scovey.
And apologies for interrupting you there, Chair. I was just going to say I just think we need to be really clear on, because I wasn't from when the last panel got put together, how the chair is chosen, and you've sort of covered that point, that and what the composition is of the panel, or of the working party, sorry, because I don't fully understand if we all just sort of volunteer. Obviously, this committee, as overview and scrutiny, is subject to party balance between the members on here. And I know, I mean, Mr. Hughes will sort of confirm, I don't think there is a requirement within for there to be the same sort of structure in the working parties, but I did feel a little bit uncomfortable when the last one was set up, and I think the first 5 of the first 6 members were not Labour, which is why I put myself forward, even though it's not a topic that I would particularly bring a lot of expertise on. But I do think we need to be mindful of that balance, because people should obviously go on to these panels, these working parties, if they've got ideas, but we are still a political council to an extent, and so I just think we need to be mindful of that.
I take that on board, and I always think that these scrutiny reviews are independent. There don't no politics involved in them. I've chaired one. I've been on 3 altogether, 2 under Labour chairs chairing them. You know, I've no issue with who chairs it, what member or part. You know, we're working together, and I think that's how we work them. You, please come back.
And it's on a separate point, Chair. I do want, on a quite serious note, actually, just to comment on something that happened at full council last week. So we've got this external grants working party, which, you know, people have been involved in doing the report, and I think there's some excellent work. It's going to come back here next month, and then it will go to Cabinet. But somebody referenced it at the last meeting, comments that had been made by community groups as a weapon, as if to say to the Cabinet, well, people have told us in an external grants working party that the council is poor at this. I don't think that was very good practice. From me, I couldn't actually remember who it was, because I made a note of it, and I tried to go back through the recording before this meeting, but I just wanted to raise the point that, in my opinion, these reports that people are working on should remain confidential to that group until they come to this panel and we approve them, and should not be used by people involved in that for political points. I don't think that really reflected very well on the work that had been done, because I think there has been some really good work done, and I don't want to see that happen again.
I mean, I can't remember that. I mean, I'm still stuck in amendments and motions. So, but there we go. Okay, point noted. Okay, so, sorry, Tricia, did you want to come back?
I just wanted to add the list that we have was a request for officers' reports, and one of them is about broken bins. And as Matt has left, can I just say we are hoping to pilot something on that in Ramsgate as a result of the work of the Litter Forum, and we can tell you more about that, or he can, at some future stage.
Perfect. Question, Bob, do we have a biodiversity officer, particularly deals with biodiversity?
We do, yes. Yeah.
Okay, any further comments or council?
Yeah, just looking at the appendix here, the table of the scrutiny reviews, the topics of scrutiny review, is empty. Is that on purpose? Or?
I think we said last time that all those were equally as important as each other.
Okay.
And then I said, which one do you, everybody decided youth. But they're all equally as important, and then we'll look at it next time. But
okay.
We can score them all, they'll all score the same. I think we just decided, so we haven't, I haven't put any scores in, because I think that we all decided that, you know, I think one's health and well-being and the other one is
biodiversity.
cost of living crisis. I think
Sure.
they're all equally important, and they will follow on. One of those two will be the next scrutiny review, yeah. Okay. Moving on to item number 12, which is the forward plan and exempt cabinet reports list. Unless there's something from that plan that the panel wish to consider, and members are asked to note the report. Excellent, thank you. That concludes business for tonight's meeting. I declare this meeting closed. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, officers, and thank you, members.